Welcome, viewers and listeners, to another edition of CHP Talks. I'm here with a very special guest and friend of mine, Mr. Ron Gray. And Ron, thank you for joining us to discuss things that are going on in our country and that have gone on over the last few weeks.
Rod, it's a great pleasure to see you again, even if it's only by Zoom. I know you've been very busy recently, and I don't know if you've had any downtime to kind of recuperate from the stresses of a campaign, but it's good to see you.
Well, thank you, and very good to see you. Had a nice chat with Janet when I called to connect with you today.
Ah,
And
yeah.
no, I haven't had a lot of downtime yet. Of course, we had a day of rest on Sunday, but we have I have some catching up to do both in in my work at home and my downtime. So hopefully that will work out. So anyway, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction. Most of our viewers and listeners know you very well, but for those who don't, Ron Gray was born in Vancouver, BC. He was a reporter for the Vancouver Sun back in the day. He also worked for the Chilliwack Progress, the Richmond Review, and the Fiji Times as reporter, photographer, and sub-editor. He was later a regional PR officer for the CBC in Vancouver, and that is takes a bit of a stretch of an imagination to think of you working for the CBC. He's done many other interesting things in his life. I'm not going to take time to review all of them today, but I got to know Ron as the leader of the Christian Heritage Party, a position he held for 13 years from 1995 until 2008. He is a dear friend, a mentor, and a wonderful example of the kind of people we need, the kind of citizens and politicians Canada so badly needs today. So, again, thanks for joining us, Ron. And a lot has happened. A lot has changed even since you were the leader of the party.
Yes.
When you became the leader, we did not have, for instance, same-sex marriage in Canada. And when you became leader, there were still, I think, a few liberal members of parliament who claimed to be pro-life and weren't ashamed of it. That has changed. And the Conservative Party probably, even though it was not really where we're at as far as being pro-life, pro-family, pro-freedom, the Conservative Party probably had a better grasp of the worldview, a Christian worldview, than we see in its membership today. So, um, comment on some of this stuff, and then we'll get into the election, and we'll talk a little bit about our new prime minister.
Well, let me introduce something about the election because I had a real conundrum facing me when the election was called. I have to tell you that back in 1980, um, when I was listening to Dr. James Dobson on the radio one day, he pledged a vow, and I took it up with him. He said he would never cast a vote for any politician who would allow one innocent baby to be killed. And that made so much sense to me. I was active in the pro life movement then, and so I took that vow. Well, when this current 2025 federal election was called, I, like most Canadians, desperately wanted to see the, the dreadful Liberals under Justin Trudeau booted out of office. And it seemed like the only way that that was going to happen was if we voted for the Conservatives. But I couldn't find any evidence that my local Conservative candidate was pro-life. And I remembered my vow. I would not vote for someone that I didn't know was pro-life. Fortunately, Ariel Alderking, who you will remember, was running I think she was running for Maxime Bernier's
Yeah,
party.
yeah,
But I
she had,
know her to be pro-life, and
yes,
so I had a place to park my vote. I knew it wasn't going to affect the outcome of the election, but I had to honor my vow
yes.
because I took that vow before God. So I voted for Ariel and then watched the results come in. The election was an astonishing one. Uh, from the earlier polls that were taken, it looked like the conservatives were going to romp home to a majority in Parliament. But when the end came, uh, well, the end is not actually yet.
Yeah.
The, the Liberals did win, sort of, maybe, but at least two votes short of the 172 they needed for a majority. And then there was one riding in Terrebonne in Quebec where where the winner was a liberal who won by one vote.
Mm, wow.
And then a woman who had voted for the bloc, May the 2nd, I think it was, she received a returned email, address unknown. And it was her ballot by mail, which she had put into an envelope prepared by Elections Canada and addressed to Elections Canada. And it had the wrong postal code on it. Elections Canada it misquoted its own address. And so she has raised the question now with the court that first did the judicial recount of Terrebonne. And she says, my vote would have resulted in a dead tie in this riding, which would mean um, there would have to be a by-election to try again to determine who had won that. And there's also another riding out in um, Newfoundland and Labrador that is still in question. The winner of that was a Liberal who won by 12 votes. Now, when they will be doing a recount, that might, so there might be two more votes lost to the Liberals, taking them 4 seats away from their majority.
Mhm.
Mr. Carney, it's so astonishing that he got parachuted into the prime minister's office by being chosen by the Liberal Party to be their leader when he has no parliamentary experience whatever,
Very,
no political experience whatever, but they parachuted him in. But he is also apparently now wooing some Green members and some NDP members who may be enticed to join his party and cross the floor. Elizabeth May, the co-leader of the Green Party, has already said she would be willing to become a Liberal for a cabinet office,
oh,
or for if she's made the Speaker of the House.
so,
So so she's waving her price tag in public.
well, that's pretty amazing. You would think, not surprising that those things happen, but to discuss it publicly as if that would, give you some credibility. You're for sale. at the right price. Yeah.
Exactly. It so it makes you question the integrity of the people, both who are waving their price tag and who are offering appointments in order to hope that they might. There's another factor for me, and I've shared this with the prayer circle at my congregation too. I believe firmly that the reason for Canada's political and economic troubles is that the blood of more than 1 million children cries out to God from the soil of this country. There's nothing we can do to restore those children, but we must repent before God and confess to Him that we have willingly been a party to this atrocity. I, this, the model I presented to the prayer circle at my congregation is the 9th chapter of Daniel. It's a remarkable prayer. Daniel, who, as you know, was a righteous man, he kept to the Torah in every respect. He obeyed God as closely as he could. He prayed at his open window 3 times a day, and that got him into trouble with some of the satraps. But when he prayed before God, he took on himself the guilt of his fathers. He said, you have been righteous, God, but we have been shameful. And I think that's the model of how we need to ask God's forgiveness and his help. And I believe he's willing to help this nation, but not until we repent.
Yes.
Well, there will be no repentance coming out of what is purporting to be our federal government now, because as you know, Justin Trudeau would not allow any pro-lifers to be candidates for the Liberal Party. I was watching Dan McTeague on television this afternoon, and Dan McTeague was a Liberal MP, and he was a pro-lifer, and he lost his position in Parliament because he wouldn't give up the advocacy of the sanctity of human life. He's a good man, but you cannot be a liberal if you're a pro-lifer. Well, you certainly cannot be an NDPer. The Dippers are very much against the sanctity of human life. The Greens are just as loony as the Dippers. And even the PPC, Maxime Bernier says he would let his MPs, if he had any, vote their conscience, but he will not make the sanctity of human life a plank in his platform, and neither will Pierre Poilievre.
Oh, absolutely not. He's come out multiple times declaring himself very strongly in strong terms that he supports abortion on demand. He supports same-sex marriage. He supports even now, apparently, he has even spoken up in terms of so-called right to die, which means quickly becoming the duty to die under MAID, the medical assistance in dying.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's taken all those stands in order to theoretically, pull, pull votes to himself, but it apparently wasn't effective in his own riding because he's contending against people who are, even more committed to the destruction of human life and the family and all that. So
Well,
now
that writing was recently expanded, and in the gerrymandering of it swept in whole neighborhoods of federal government employees who are, their their employees, their government employees union is officially in favor of abortion and maid and same-sex marriage and all of those things. And I think Mr. Poiliev made a couple of really big blunders by which he threw away what looked like a majority government. First of all, he joined Mr. Carney in bad mouthing the President of the United States.
right.
And, you know, a lot of Canadians have a severe case of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, it seems to that seems to cross the border quite readily. Well, of course, our major TV networks and other mainstream news suppliers, they share a worldview and they share the common airwaves and the so what gets said in Washington is repeated here in Toronto, and so
Well, yeah, and there's another aspect in which the CBC. You mentioned that I used to work for the CBC. I wasn't a believer at that time, but yeah, I was an experienced newsman. I'd trained under Jack Webster, and at that time, I saw, and I would still say at that time, the CBC was a reputable news carrier, quite responsible and very objective. But the CBC has changed dramatically.
yeah,
And with that change, the CBC has altered the whole news business in Canada. If you were a young reporter today, starting out on your career, and you get hired by the Chilliwack Progress, you would quickly learn that the apex of the news industry in Canada is the CBC. That's the golden goal. That's the place you want to go to. You'll have respect. You'll have lots of money because they really pay some of their big names lavishly. Well, and the way to get that is to start as a young reporter or young editor, tailoring your news handling to catch the attention of the editors at the CBC. When they know that you're on their wavelength, then the doors will open eventually. So that colors virtually the whole of the news industry in Canada. And there's a few exemptions, like Brian Lilly of the Toronto Sun is quite good. And of course, there's one of the features of this election campaign that delighted me was to see the strength that the independent news channels began to show.
yeah.
And some of them, there's Candace Malcolm and Kian Bexty at Juno. There is Jasmine Lane, who has her own commentary channel called Over Opinionated.
Yeah,
But and it's true, and she's quite open about it. She says, these are my opinions, but I will tell you the facts.
yeah,
And she doesn't change the facts to fit her opinions.
yeah.
And there's another one called Northern Perspective, Ryan and Tanya, a husband and wife team do that. And they do an excellent job. And there's there's one called Moose on the Loose, which is chaired by a young man. His name is David, and I can't quite pronounce his last name. He never says it on there, but I looked it up. But he does some splendid analysis of corporate links within the news and political industries.
Yeah,
So
and of course, Mark Carney has vowed to give CBC even more money with
yes, well, he said he would give them $150,000 a year besides the 1.4 billion that they get,
yeah,
but he's already upped that to $200 million.
yeah. So
So it's ah
that talking about buying opinion, buying influence with taxpayer money. Of course, everything is bought with taxpayer money, not just yours and mine, but our grandchildren and their children are being made slaves to this journalism, what passes for journalism under the regime of the liberals, and I'm sure that uh,
yeah,
the other.
they're just government stenographers.
Yeah.
Whatever the government says, they will report as though it were a fact.
So, Ron, before we tie things off, I want to ask, I'm sure you have some insights, some thoughts about our new prime minister, specifically the things he has done, the things he will do, the things we expect that he will do, and maybe just can give us a few of the nuggets that you've picked up that I know that the mainstream media did not expose the depth of of his problems that he's bringing to us, and some of the double speak that he's number one going to bring us into net zero by 2050, but number two he's going to make us energy independent or an energy superpower. How do those things work together? And anyway, maybe you can just whatever you want to share things that you've
Well,
read and
those
know
things
about.
don't work together. I mean, to begin with, most of the energy that Canada has is in the form of fossil fuels. And if those can't find a way to tidewater to be shipped to other nations, then the only place we can sell it is to the United States at 40% off the world price. So that's throttling Alberta, it's throttling Canada, and and it's forcing Canada to give away its energy at a discounted price. But there's many other things that are suspicious about this new prime minister, and reasons why I'm glad there's an independent journalistic cadre that is going to watch him carefully. But take, for example, the fact that he was the CEO of Brookfield Asset Management Corporation. Right. He put that into a blind trust. A blind trust means that his hands are off it. He can't, but he does know what his assets are. And among his assets in that blind trust are stock options with Brookfield Asset Management that when his term as prime minister is over, if the things that he has done as prime minister have favored the investment targets of Brookfield, he will then get millions, hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars of bonuses and stock options. Well, one of the one of the projects that he has announced for Canada, we have a serious housing shortage. He's talking about little modular houses, boom, 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 kind of like, you know, trailer parks all over the country to provide a place for people to live. One of the primary investment fields in which Brookfield is represented has its investment is a company that makes little modular houses. So his action on that policy will eventually redound to his personal benefit. Before the election was over, well, actually, before this election was called, he had gone to China and obtained a $256 million loan from the Chinese National Bank. We don't know what the terms of that loan were, but we know that it was a big favor to Brookfield Asset Management. But he's not alone in that. If you look at the history of our prime ministers, both the prime ministers Trudeau were heavily invested in China. Jean Chrétien was heavily invested in China. Paul Martin was heavily invested in China. John McCallum, who used to be the disgraced Canadian ambassador to China, was heavily invested in China. We have so many of our politicians who are in the pockets of Xi Jinping. And they are a menace to our nation, to our nation's security. Do you remember that Justin Trudeau invited members of the People's Liberation Army to come and train in the Canadian Arctic? What? China has no Arctic landmass anywhere. But they're interested in the Arctic. They're interested in our Arctic because the Northwest Passage is beginning to open up for shipping. And there are just offshore, beyond the 12-mile limits, there are massive, massive oil and gas and mineral deposits waiting to be plucked up. So in all of these things, our politicians, the people who are supposed to be protecting our interests, have been looking the other way while our pockets are being picked. It's a dangerous time. Yeah. But again, I want to reiterate, God will defend us, but not while the blood of 1 million children cries out from the soil of Canada. Not until we acknowledge our wickedness and repent sincerely. But then if we will do that, I really believe Canada can have a brilliant future, but the alternative is social and political and economic and legal decay.
Yeah.
And that's the road that we've been put on.
Yes. There's unfortunately many Canadians, including many Christians and conservative-minded people, have bought the deception or the illusion that we can separate morality from public policy, that we can achieve economic stability while allowing this horrible slaughter of the innocent to go on. And you and I agree that cannot be done. God is not mocked. He has laid things out very clearly. Thou shalt not kill, and then his design of the traditional family, and his design of the human, not only the mind but the conscience, and that he he has made it possible for us to desire and walk in a devoted moral framework if we will give ourselves over to him and acknowledge who he is, that he is the creator
Rod,
of the universe and
before
created
this
image.
before this interview ends, I want to take this occasion to thank you for having the courage and the determination to continue to stand before the public and make the offer, would you like to be governed according to biblical principles? If so, we will do our best. That offer, if no one makes that offer, the offer is not made. But I am so grateful to you that through all the slings and arrows of media attacks and political organizations that try to bypass you and ignore you, you still continue to stand for what is right. And I want to thank you, my friend, on behalf of millions of Canadians, some of whom join me in saying this, others of whom will one day join me in saying this because it is what's right.
Well,
Thank you, Rod.
well, thank you for that, and of course, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We appreciate you for having represented the party so well for all those years, and the founders of the party, who, some of them, I have heard a lament in this recent election. Some of the founders did not have a CHP candidate to vote for, and that is a crying shame.
Yeah.
But we need the people of Canada to recognize that there is an opportunity to step forward, to put a name on the ballot, and to stand with us shoulder to shoulder and offering, as you say, a place to cast your ballot that is, and it's not just a place to cast your ballot, but if enough people do that, of course, we could have a significant influence on the direction of this country, and that's what we offer ourselves for. But we will make the right offer. We will stand on these principles, regardless of the response, because that's what that's what God calls us to do. But we do make that offer sincerely that there is an opportunity if people will put aside their pragmatic concepts of just fix the economy and get rid of the liberals. That's enough. No, that's not enough. We need to base our public policy on biblical principles and return to the God who made us and who has great things for us if we'll just acknowledge Him and walk in His paths.
I just finished reading a book published very recently by the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, ARC. It's an organization that was put together in part by Jordan Peterson and several other people. But in the introduction to it, Baroness Stroud from the UK quoted Alexander Solzhenitsyn when he spoke to the graduating class at Harvard. When was that? 1970, I think it was. It was quite a while back. Maybe it was in the late 60s. Solzhenitsyn said, the reason for all the problems in the West is that we have forgotten our Christian heritage.
Wow.
And that jumped right off the page at me.
I guess
And
so.
I thought,
Yeah.
thank you, Alexander.
Yeah.
Thank you, Baroness Stroud. So there it is. If we continue to uphold the Christian heritage, it's not the Christian party. We're not trying to make the whole nation convert to Christianity. It'd be nice if they did, but That's something individuals have to decide is between them and God. But the Christian heritage of this nation encompasses our law, uh, our philosophy, our art, our governance, the whole of society in the West rests on the Christian heritage. And that's what Solzhenitsyn was telling them. The trouble with the West is that they have forgotten their Christian heritage.
Well, Ron, that's tremendous. And I think we'll close on that note. And God bless you. Thank you for taking the time to spend with us. I always appreciate so much the richness of what you represent and how you have carried yourself, both as a citizen and as when you were the leader of the party. And I still benefit from having been in touch with you when you were leader, and of course very much since then. I benefit from your wisdom, and I appreciate you taking the time to spend with our viewers and listeners today.
Thank you for having me.
God bless you.
And you.